that would provide scholarships to students attending home, private, virtual, or public schools. MSBA strongly opposed the bill for allowing taxpayer dollars to be used to pay fees and tuition to private or home schools that are not accountable to the public. Despite that disappointing vote, there were some successes during the session, including the defeat of legislation that would have expanded charter schools beyond St. Louis and Kansas City, and attempts to move school board elections to the November general election date. MSBA Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, Mike Reed, says school board member contacts with legislators made a difference on those and other issues.
And I really appreciate all of our members going out and hammering their representatives and their senators about that bill. And in fact, hammering them on the ESA bill. After the ESA bill passed the House, I was told by more than one representative, that's it. We're not going to pass another education bill because we don't want to be hammered by our constituents. So our members did a great job in getting the word out. We just need to keep holding representatives and senators' feet to the fire to make sure, when they say they're representing education and they're trying to help your district, make sure that they are.
MSBA's positions on state and federal education issues are determined by the delegate assembly that will be meeting this coming November. If your school board has a position statement on an issue you would like to submit to the advocacy committee for consideration, you can do so. The advocacy committee reviews those proposals and makes recommendations to the delegate assembly that determines MSBA's positions on the issues. The deadline for submitting a new or revised position statement is September 1st. Economic development tax abatements given to businesses cost Missouri public school districts more than $130 million a year in fiscal year 2019, according to data collected by a group called Good Jobs First. MSBA has advocated for many years to reform tax abatements that have a significant impact on school district revenue, including allowing local voters the opportunity to opt out of tax abatement projects impacting funding for public schools, and giving school boards veto power over their portion of any tax abatement project. Good Jobs First Executive Director Greg Leroy tells us that rather than granting tax abatements, investing in schools is the smart economic development strategy.
If you disinvest your public sector, and obviously at the top of the list is schools, but it also means infrastructure and parks and quality of life and public safety now with the pandemic. If you disinvest the public sector, you make it hard to attract reinvestment in the private sector, right? Because if you're expecting to attract companies with good jobs in the information age technology now, you got to have great schools. You're not going to attract families to transfer into an area with marginal schools, for example, or marginal quality of life.
Leroy urges school boards to advocate for their revenue sources.
I think that school board leaders are uniquely positioned to become business climate crusaders for Missouri. I think you can make a very compelling case that by defending funding for schools and in protecting the quality of your schools, by protecting your funding base, you can grow the state's economy better than giving away the store.
Good Jobs First is a nonpartisan nonprofit group that promotes accountability in economic development. It's no secret that teachers are the biggest school-based factor in student success and the single most influential component of an effective school. And it's also no secret that recruiting and retaining teachers remains a significant challenge for school districts throughout Missouri and the nation. That's especially true as we emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. To help address the issue, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has announced a $50 million investment to grow Missouri's teacher workforce. That money is available through federal COVID-19 relief funds. DESE will make $10,000 grants available to school districts to establish or expand Grow Your Own programs that encourage high school students to consider teaching as a career, along with grants to implement strategies designed to improve teacher retention. We recently spoke to a graduating senior who plans to become a teacher, Marion Benion from the Camdenton School District.
I've loved, being at school and just experiencing that. I've had a lot of opportunities being able to teach other people, and being able to help other people reach their full potential has just been really insightful to me. Just helping people find their passions is just what I've been really focused on, and that's what I want to do.
Marion was among the students who participated in a signing ceremony for those graduating seniors in Camdenton who are pursuing a college degree in education. MSBA encourages Missouri students to consider pursuing a career in education. Make your plans now to attend the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators, to be held November 4th through 7th in Kansas City. The event will once again feature more than 100 sessions and workshops, many presented by school leaders from districts throughout the state, all in our new location at the Kansas City Convention Center. Registration information for the conference will be posted on the MSBA website. And don't forget the 2021 Safe Schools and Colleges Forum, sponsored by MSBA Center for Education Safety, that will be held this year on November 4th in conjunction with the annual conference in Kansas City. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
All right. Next weekend, June 18th and 19th, is the Leadership or Igniting Great Ideas Summit down in Springfield. I'll be going down there for the weekend. I'm not sure, I don't think anyone else is going. So it'll be a party of one, but I'll get it done and report back on everything that has happened. Please consider, and I know November is a long way away, but it's like right around the corner. As we go through the summer and start school already in just a few moments. Consider going to Kansas City for the annual conference in November the 5th through the 7th. And maybe we can go as a group to that. Think about it, look at your calendars, see what we can do. And just to throw out, I know summertime people are busy, some people aren't as busy. Consider where you are with the MSBA's training, and think about maybe taking it up a notch. If you got your basic training done, work on the next level. If you got the master's level done, there's one more level above that you can achieve. So consider working on that over the summer. Read a book or so. If you need a book or anything, you can give them through Chris's office. They'll get them for us. And we can update our library is what it'd be. And it'll be some good reading, some lighter reading for us, and along with keeping up to date on what's going on in our schooling as well. And with that, Madam President, that concludes my report.
Moving on to 2.04, Special School District Report.
We're backstage, but it didn't work out. We failed in our backstage appearance.
Okay, Rob Eaton is our parent rep, and so he's going to go first. We had our meeting, so we'll go ahead with you first.
So I just wanted to update everybody with the help of Julie Hahn, who has been a lifesaver for me. We have been able to secure the location for a meeting now. That is all done. We have, with the education part of Special School District, we have all of our training classes set up. I have speakers in place for all of those. I know that it was asked the last time we talked about doing YouTube or Facebook Live for those meetings also. I wanted to let everybody know that I did talk about that with Special School District, and they have asked us not to do that. because there are still some legality issues with information that is shared. So they have asked us if we want to do it, we have to do it through Zoom links. And I've talked with Julie, and she has given me let me keep the Zoom link that we have for PTOs. So we will put that information out. That way it's a little more private because people have to have the link. You can't just find RItenour School District and find us on there. So they asked us for privacy issues not to do it live on those two airwaves. So we did make that change. And then working with Doug Gray's office, they will be sending out in all the back to school packets. We've got flyers that are going out. We're going to start hitting Peach Jar. We're going to start hitting, I talked with Ms. Bannister from the high school. She's going to get it out on her social media sites through the high school, as well as come August, they will put it on the radio station information. So we're hitting all the airwaves to get it out there that we have the pack starting in September. No, because then they ask questions.
That's the right thing to do.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Scored.
Good information.
Okay.
I would just like to say, Ms. Reed, thank you for your leadership. We've not had a very strong functioning SSD pack in the recent past. And I remember the meeting, it was about this time last year when an SSD presentation was made and you were sitting over our left shoulder and we turned and looked at you. And from that time, it's been full speed ahead. So I'd like to say thank you.
Well, I will say that getting active with creating RPAC, I also have accepted a position with SSD's PAC, the school district, their school district PAC, as their vice president for the parent advocacy committee also. So I'm crazy.
That's a good thing. You're an excellent volunteer. I think he's bringing up the slide presentation.
Okay.
We had our meeting on Monday evening at SSD. It was a Zoom meeting. It was very interesting. It was also very long, but we accomplished quite a lot. I just heard the ding, ding, ding. Is it coming up? Yep, there it is. Okay, so notice I put the SSD meeting report in blue because that's their color. Do I do this?
Just click it on the side right here. You go with that.
Where do I do? Okay.
And then this is forward.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the way they do it. They do their mission first and their vision. Their mission is to support and empower students of all learning abilities to excel to their greatest potential. And their vision is every student realizes their full potential in life and learning. And the thing I thought about with this was, it's right in line with ours, only it's just a lot less words. But we could definitely substitute ours, substitute theirs for ours because we're right on the same page with that. Then they have core values. And their core values are equity. Every student, regardless of learning ability or socioeconomic status, deserves access to the services they need to succeed. I believe we all agree with that. Commitment, everything we do revolves around our commitment to students and their success. We all agree with that. And collaboration, we work with parents, students, partner districts, and the community to benefit students. So all good, we're all lined up for that. A little bit of history. 1957, I mostly did this for Vanessa because she was new, but she'll get the slide, so it'll all be good. 1957, the SSD formed when St. Louis County voted to establish a countywide district to support the education of students with disabilities. And in 1996, the governing council was established to oversee the Board of Education for SSD. And then in 98, the role of the governing council included electing the board members. So their structure, the governing council is composed of Board of Education directors from each of the county public school districts. Their role is to elect a 7-member school board from the county, which is divided into 7 sub-districts. They approve the SSD budget, they approve CSIP, CSIP, and meet a minimum of 4 times per year. Monday, the governing council received a general report by Jeff Haig, He's our CFO. It covered the types of funds, the percent of funds received from local, state, and federal, and the current SSD's tax rate. CSIP report was from Molly Bolton, a prior RItenour teacher, which stated the 4 goals and status of student performance, workforce excellence, engagement, and equity, which we all approved. And then we heard about the fiscal year 22 budget, and that was approved, and just some of the highlights. 482 million, which is about 7 million increase over fiscal year 21. And there are 4 budget goals: staffing, curriculum support, facilities, and equity. They are adding 51.1 new positions of the 95 that were requested. I don't know how you do a 0.1 person, but that's something they can figure out. There's 23,286 students that they served as of December 1st of this past year. We had a communications update based on the brand feedback and awareness that they received from different surveys and work groups. It resulted in a new logo, which will come out this summer. How about that? I think they said the last time they updated it was 2004. Fiscal year 21 budget adjustments were discussed and approved, and then we elected 3 governing council officers, Jennifer Miller from Lindbergh, Keisha Lee from Ladue, and Veronica Moreau-Rio from Riverview Gardens. They were all in that position last year, and they all wanted to do it again, so that's awesome. Then we discussed the meeting format, whether to continue it as virtual or in person, and they decided to stay virtual for all meetings, except for the March meeting. Evidently, when the election of the SSD Board of Education took place, it was very hard to do through the Zoom. I know when I was on this before, you have to listen to the people make a statement, they get to talk, and then you have to vote. And I'm sure that Zoom was probably difficult for that. So all of them will be virtual except that one meeting in March. So do you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns you would like me to address? I would just like to say I'm glad Stacy started doing these like this, because I thought I'll just follow in her footsteps, because I think it's good.
What percentage what percentage of our students use?
I don't know the exact number, but isn't it a little more like
percentage of students with IEPs?
that we serve, that are served in our district?
A little north of 17%.
A little north of 17%, Jennifer. Any more questions?
17.2.
It's 17.1, there's that 0.1 in here.
Yeah.
Is it staying kind of consistent over the years?
Relatively consistent. So we are above the number of students, or the percent of students that are being identified in RItenour is above state norms. It's above national norms. And so we're working with special school district. Julie Hahn is the special school district liaison for the partner district, which is what we are. Part of the work is to bring the percentage of students that are qualifying for special supports down to be more in line with state and national norms, which is generally below 15%. So we're above and beyond that. We have roughly about 70 students district-wide that are served in separate buildings. So that number of students also factor into that percentage. So that takes into account students that are in separate placements, as well as students that might be receiving speech and language goals as well.
Right, they also did say the way that they determine if they need another teacher was they use a ratio of 15 students to 1 teacher. If it's greater than that, then they have another teacher. So I thought that was interesting. That concludes my report. Thank you. Feel free if you have any concerns or thoughts other than just questions, let me know. I'm happy to take them back on behalf of our district. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eden and Mrs. Berghoff. We are moving on to our business items. 3.01, policy equity audit. Dr. LaChance is coming with our district attorneys.
Board members, tonight I'm happy to introduce Michelle Basie and Anya Carr with Tooth Keeney. They have been conducting for several months now an equity policy audit for the district. And tonight they're going to give an overview with some areas that we need to consider moving forward. I will turn this over now. Thank you for being here.
Excellent, thank you. Can you guys hear us? Thank you for having us here tonight. We're going to just do a brief introduction. Then we're going to provide a little bit of background information that I think is important for placing this kind of policy review in context. Talk a little bit about the Board of Education, the role of the board generally. You guys know what you're doing, but just to place it all in context, the purpose of board policy. You all have already adopted an equity statement, so we will briefly review that and then provide some of our general areas of recommendations for consideration, and then talk just briefly about what the next steps are. So Dr. LaChance, thank you for the introduction. We are both attorneys with Tooth Keeney, Cooper, Mohan, and Jackstadt, your friendly school district attorneys. We're a firm of about 25 attorneys, and we do primarily education law. I've been with the firm for about 18 years. Anya's going on her coming into her fourth year with the firm, and we both work primarily in education. Anya also does a lot of higher education work and litigation. Part of our job is helping school districts make sure that you remain in compliance with the law, right? But also with respect to best practices and kind of current educational trends and where the priorities are for education. And obviously one of those big priorities is educational equity. So what we have been charged with doing is reviewing the policies from a legal perspective, but through that lens of equity, and give some legal recommendations with respect to those policies. So just briefly, the role of the Board of Education, you all know you are charged with the governing of the district, right? That includes clarifying the district's purpose, right? Identifying goals for the district. Missouri is very much generally a local control state, right? Which means that the members of the community are represented by the board members, right? And so part of the role of the board is taking your local community and setting the priorities for the district within the legal framework that exists. Of course, effective governance includes setting priorities and goals, but then also monitoring that performance, measuring outcomes, and creating systems for accountability. And a lot of that is done through your board policies, right? And so when we talk about equity, we want to talk about ways of incorporating equity as a priority and goal. How do we monitor performance with respect to equity? And then how do we measure outcomes and create accountability around equity?
And also, before we move on,
Yep.
to add to that, with the board policies, when we are monitoring them and creating systems for the accountability, looking back on those policies to determine, does this work? So you can't hear me? Sorry. Is this working? Reevaluating those things. Are we?
Is it on?
It's not working.
There we go.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. Is that better? I was just saying, looking back at those policies that we've, created, re-evaluating them, determining if they're working, what needs to be changed, which I know you all do a lot of already, but specifically with the equity policies that you're going to create, presumably, just look at those and see, what needs to be tweaked. Are they working well? How can we make them better?
So we look at what is the purpose of board policy, right? It's to ensure compliance with federal and state legal requirements, right? That's kind of the top level, right? Ensure compliance with best practices is the next level. So there may be things that, while not required by law, are very clearly the best practices and have to be put into policy. Another purpose of board policy is to inform board members, staff members, students, parents, and community of the procedural operations, right, of the district, as well as applicable rights and responsibilities, right? So what is the student code of conduct, right? What are expectations for staff? If I'm a parent and I want to use the school facilities, what is the rules for school facilities, right? All of those things are governed by board policy. And then of course, the purpose of policy is also to set priorities and expectations, right? And hopefully, the Board of Education is sort of at this governance level, setting policy, and then that permeates down really to all aspects of the district. Various sources of board policy, we have federal law, right? Large numbers of federal laws that implicate board policy. We have the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is, it used to be the No Child Left Behind. Now it's the Every Student Succeeds Act. Lots of our board policies actually come from the Every Student Succeeds Act, right? And a lot of them that potentially relate to equity issues. We have, you have to have a wellness policy. You have to have a family engagement policy. You have to have a McKinney-Vento policy for students who are in transition or who are homeless, right? So all of those policies, the Title I policies, a lot of our funding policies are from the Every Student Succeeds Act. The non- Yeah. You want me to do that? Okay, non-discrimination, federal non-discrimination laws. Obviously, we have Title VI, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of race and applies generally to in the student context. Title VII, which prohibits discrimination usually in the employment context. Title IX, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Of course, Section 504 and the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have policies that create both the prohibition against discrimination and harassment under each of these laws, but also that create grievance processes. So if someone thinks there has been a violation of those policies, sets forth the procedures for addressing those concerns. Special education law, right? We were just talking about SSD, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, which is fundamentally a non-discrimination law, right? And really goes to equity for students with disabilities. How do we get students with disabilities the services that they need? Section 504 applies more broadly to individuals with disabilities than IDEA, but again, is a non-discrimination law. And then we also have federal case law, right? Supreme Court decisions such as Goss v. Lopez, which is the decision that provides the framework for student suspensions, right? The type of due process that has to be provided for student suspensions. Lots of First Amendment case law, and some of that is incorporated into board policy.
Other sources of board policy are state law, in addition to the federal law. As we know, there's the Missouri Human Rights Act that is similar to Title VII in the federal context. School board governance, the district organization, the Teacher Tenure Act, which I'm sure we're all familiar with here. Safe Schools Act, Missouri School Boards Association. So our school policies are created with these in mind and in compliance with these, and they are intertwined throughout our school board policies.
I think the Safe Schools Act is one of the laws that has the biggest impact, particularly with respect to student policies, right? And it comes up a lot when we are talking about board policies and equity. So one example, right, that comes up a lot when we talk about equity is the impact of suspensions of students, right? And what kind of impact does suspensions have? Do we have to suspend students? Can we just eliminate suspensions, right? And the role of law enforcement in schools is another very important consideration as we talk about equity. But it's also important to note that the Missouri Safe Schools Act does have very specific requirements. For example, with respect to what has to be reported to law enforcement from schools and what law enforcement has to report to schools, as well as very specific requirements for certain elements of a student discipline policy. For example, when a student brings a weapon to school, the Safe Schools Act prescribes what has to be in the policy. So when we're looking at equity issues, we're always balancing that with what does the law say, right? And we do have to have certain things in our policies. a lot of it's important as we're talking about the source of board policies, right? There are policy services, Missouri School Boards Association, there's other ones, and they provide sort of ongoing policy updates. And then of course, frequently districts have district-specific policies, right? It's very specific things that are particularly important to the district. And that's where we come to several school districts now are looking at specifically adopting a policy regarding educational equity. And Anya, I think, is going to review, you all have sort of taken that first step here.
That's right. You guys have already created your equity statement, right? So that means that you are, aware of the importance of equity, and you're keeping that in your mind when you're applying your policies and implementing your policies throughout the school district. So I'm not going to read this to you. You know what it says in your statement. You move on to the next one. This is just important to point out that, again, you've already acknowledged that you need to treat everyone with respect, dignity, and value everyone. You understand that the community as a whole is what makes up the district, and if the community isn't happy, that's gonna trickle down to the district. If parents, if students, if other employees of the school district are having issues, you're gonna see that throughout your day-to-day. Prioritizing your interactions with the community, being welcoming, warm, friendly. Again, these are all things that you have in your statement that will guide you if you do decide to take the next step and create maybe a guideline or equity policy. This one here is, again, teachers will embed cultural competency, responsiveness, and trauma-informed practices into their teaching and interactions with students. There should be an understanding here by all teachers, like, what does this actually mean? What does it mean for me to be culturally competent? What does it mean for me to respond in this way, to be trauma-informed? And that happens through training, right? So part of this is just, implementing and sitting these teachers down and just kind of explaining to them, this is what we mean by this, undergoing that training, ensuring that they understand that. And the students in the community will notice when these teachers are, responding in a way that is specific to their needs and desires. Creating anti-bias and anti-racist systems. I think this here is, self-explanatory. Again, keep that in mind here, that just want to educate all stakeholders. Anything you want to add there?
Nope. Restorative approach to discipline. Again, I think, a commitment to reduce exclusionary discipline practices, removing cultural factors. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And then again, this is your commitment as a board. And so I think, as we are looking at policies, it's important to keep in mind, much of policy language is dictated by law, right? So there's a lot of what is in policy is there because that's what the law says has to be there, right? Policy is an overall framework, and many times the issues regarding equity arise more, not so much with the policy language itself, but in how the policies are implemented, right? And of course, unique circumstances of specific community may vary priorities. So what may be considered a policy that promotes equity in one district may not be applicable in another district, right? When adopting changes to policy with an equity lens, of course, we still want to follow our typical policy changing procedures. And as Anya mentioned, you can change a policy, but any effective change has to also include training, right?
So considerations for the equity policy, as Michelle said earlier, that some districts have already adopted policy ACJ. We think here that within this policy, if it is something that you guys decide that an equity statement is important, just again to put out there and to ensure that it's board approved. incorporating the policy can have a greater impact than just having that statement. So keep that in mind.
So for example, right, so you've got your board approved equity statement, right? A board policy can have even greater impact. So for example, a lot of times teacher contracts will incorporate board policy by reference, right? And so when if you have that statement sort of turned into an equity policy, it has a little more oomph. So that's a legal description. So, and I think, for the policy or regulation, adding into that, taking your equity statement framework, but adding into it, how do we ensure that commitment to equity permeates decision-making, right? So it provides some guidance for administrators and decision makers in the district in implementing what the board has identified as their vision for equity. And then Anya mentioned the importance of the annual review, right? That accountability piece.
So these are just questions here that in creating new policies or thinking about, what policies are needed, to just sit down at the table and ask yourself, whom does this benefit? Does this differentially impact any sort of racial or ethnic, gender, socioeconomic groups? And what can be included to decrease or eliminate any disparities that might be brought about because of this policy? So just kind of some, just get your brains thinking the framework for, is this policy necessary? Who is it going to benefit? Who is it going to differentially impact? And what can we change about it to ensure that doesn't happen?
And I think those questions, they're taken in part from the Ferguson Commission report from Forward Through Ferguson, those can be incorporated into that equity policy. And then, as you can see, it sort of permeates down, right? So if we're looking at adopting a new policy, asking these questions, as we're looking at reorganizing a grade level, for example, looking at these questions, as we're looking at adopting a curriculum, right, answering these questions. So it kind of can permeate down to make sure that vision is incorporated.
I also think to note there that it's important to ask, why are we considering adopting this policy? Why, who is it, if it's, for example, a student discipline policy, what students are we seeing issues with? Do they have something in common? Is it necessary to adopt the policy, or should we just approach it in a different way to, maybe respond in a different way? Maybe there's a lack of understanding there of some sort of cultural, awareness or something of that nature. So just kind of ask those brainstorming questions even before you get to that, who does it impact?
Adding an aspect of data review to an equity policy also would help inform that accountability piece. So again, using your equity statement as a framework for the policy, but adding some more specifics on how to implement that vision. So making sure that the district is collecting and reviewing data that specifically relates to equity. And there's obviously a wide range of data, right? Student discipline data, but hiring data, participation in advanced placement classes, right? There's all sorts of data that can be reviewed with respect to equity.
So some considerations with an equity lens and thinking about some of the personnel policy, think about, if there is a practice that you have where you're, posting new jobs or positions that come up only internally. Maybe consider, does the makeup of our district need to be more diversified? And how is it that posting something internally is going to accomplish that goal, right? Maybe we make it a practice to post all positions or all opportunities externally so that we do get that, larger community and the opportunity to diversify the makeup of the district. The application and interview processes, what does that look like? Should you consider maybe redacting the names of the individuals, the review committee, redacting the names of the individuals on the application so that we're ensuring that no implicit bias is at play when we're reviewing applications and interviewing. Something of that nature, just looking at it from an equity lens, because we are aware that we all have these biases, these implicit biases. So how can we decrease that impact of that? Professional development, other policies include as we mentioned earlier, the anti-bias, anti-racist training, include cultural competency as an area of focus. What does our evaluation criteria look like? Is this something that could be changed through an equity lens to, more fairly be applied across the board?
And does it include, consideration of how a staff member is performing with respect to the priorities that are set out in that equity policy?
Yeah, and then some fringe benefits and leave. Definition of family here is one that stands out to me. Just growing up, I had a cousin that we raised, right? That was my sister. You know what I mean? What is the definition of family? We had a bunch of, friends from the neighborhood that my mom would take in and things like that. Like those are my family members. So again, what is your understanding of your, community, your district and the makeup, and understand how other people view what family is, and be inclusive of that.
I think another policy consideration for the personnel aspect is making sure you have accountability policies that can be used for staff that reach kind of this level of equity. You definitely have policies in place that prohibit conduct that rises to the level of discrimination or harassment, right? But that's a pretty high standard, right? You also might have conduct that is just offensive, right? Or that is hurtful to the community. But doesn't necessarily rise to the level of discrimination, legal discrimination or harassment, right? So having that staff conduct policy in place that does, for example, require just professional, courteous, respectful relationships with each member of the community, students, staff, parents, I think also helps with that accountability piece on the personnel side. Some student policy considerations, starting with just the admissions and enrollment policies, right? How often do we use the term parent rather than parent or guardian, right? Enrollment procedures, making sure that as we look at those enrollment procedures in the policy, there's information in there about like residency requirements, which is important, but it's also important that we communicate what the exceptions are and how to, if you need to use those exceptions, who to contact, how to access those, and that they are available. Considering which staff members require training on admissions or enrollment questions and implementation. A lot of times those questions are actually answered, for example, by building office staff. And do they have the information that they need to provide accurate information that includes all of the varying exceptions and definitions of parent and that kind of thing that we can use. Anti-harassment policy, you all do have a student-specific anti-harassment policy, which is excellent. And I think with all of these issues, right, with the equity policy or statement, with your general non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy, when there's a Title IX policy, we want to make sure that we're using consistent language across those. Right, so who are we identifying as particularly protected? What are we identifying as protected characteristics, and use that similar language across all categories? And for example, in the anti-harassment policy, making sure that we are using examples that are not just sex-based, right? Preventing sexual harassment is very important, don't get me wrong, right? But also maybe providing examples of race-based harassment. Or disability-based harassment, which is one of the most prevalent kinds of harassment that we see in schools. Attendance and truancy policies, I think you can look to explicitly incorporate factors such as trauma and homelessness in those policies to make sure that we are not sort of disciplining students for some of those factors that we're looking at the root of that, which I know you're probably doing anyways. It's just a matter of incorporating that language in the policy and including some flexibility in those processes, especially for students who may be in transition. And then of course, student conduct policies, right? We want to consider factors for administrators to take into consideration when administering student discipline, right? When we're implementing our discipline policies, are we looking at the impact of trauma? Are we looking at the impact of homelessness? Are we looking at the impact of poverty? Which a lot of your trauma-informed training goes to this, right? Helping teachers identify what behavior, frankly, what the behavior of students is communicating, right? Recognizing that and being able to address that issue, but looking for ways to then incorporate that kind of training and what's being learned in that kind of training in those discipline policies, emphasizing that trauma-informed approach. And I think in the area of student conduct, one of the most important things is identifying a process for regular review of disciplinary data, which you may already do, right? But looking at that data and saying, okay, what are we going to do with this information? How can we make changes based on the information we're gathering? Disciplinary violations, making sure that they're, are the offenses, is there clarity of offenses, right? A lot of studies have shown that the discrepancies in discipline start at the referral stage, right? What is this student being referred to the office for, right? Is it disrespectful conduct, or is it not having a hall pass, right? And is that a different disciplinary level? So making sure that there's good training on making sure that students are sort of being referred to the office, if necessary, at the lowest level offense, right? And again, that anti-bias training was so important. Other areas that we noted where language from the equity statement could be incorporated is policies regarding instructional goals, controversial issues. It'd be worth looking at those to see, is this somewhere where we want to incorporate some of our language from the equity statement? Then of course, the involvement of law enforcement. As I mentioned earlier, the reporting between school and law enforcement is largely a matter of law, but it's certainly always worth reviewing the role of law enforcement in the school setting. Review or consider a memorandum of understanding with law enforcement that helps clarify that role and expectations. Maintaining what's called a third-degree assault reporting agreement, which helps clarify what is going to be reported when. And then clarifying important issues in that role of law enforcement, including the maintenance of records, who's going to conduct searches and when, and potentially the issue of body cameras or just issues that we've seen come up with that role of law enforcement. Also keeping track of data with respect to alternative education, incorporating that information into discipline or academic policies, and as always, training. So the next steps with this is we have identified some specific policy recommendations. So we would discuss the legal basis, any legal recommendations that we have with the appropriate administrator, hopefully then implement the policy revision process where appropriate, of course, input from stakeholders, and then any additional legal review and ultimately board approval. So we're certainly happy to answer any questions. It's a lot of talking from us, side.
So did you go through all of our policies? Have you read all of our policies?
We have gone, yes, at least preliminarily through all of the policies.
Are there specific recommendations for these policies?
We have some specific recommendations, possibly the adoption of just an equity policy, if that would be something that the board is interested in. And then some specific changes, not a ton.
That will come, it's not done? We didn't get any of those through this audit?
We will, so a lot of it is like identifying potential areas. And then our next step would be then reviewing with the administrators why this policy is the way that it is right now. So for example, we may identify something as like, oh, let's talk about this. I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a leave issue, right? That a leave policy that's written a certain way. We might say, why is it written like this? And the administration may be able to tell us, oh, it's because X, Y, Z. And we're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. It's not an issue. Moving on, right? So the next step would be kind of a more specific kind of legal review that would generally be done initially with the administration, and then certainly to the extent that there's any legal advice in a closed session.
So that you don't have a document that says we have 500 policies and 25 of them need to be revised or anything to meet current state law? We don't have anything like that?
No, I would not say that we have that. We have flagged certain policies where we have questions and possible recommendations.
I guess I was looking for more. I was looking more for specific things. A lot of this is general information that is really boilerplate. I was looking for you to dive deep into our policies and tell us what we can change, what going according to state law.
That's in the next couple of steps.
How long did this step take?
A week.
In terms of hours, I don't have it off the top of my head.
Another example, Dr. Thomas, of that is we even had a conversation today about one of our policy that calls out a specific work group.
Yeah.
And that raises legal questions of why would you call out a specific work group that potentially, the way it reads, potentially could be harmed or benefited by the policy. So that is a potential area of discrimination if you're calling out a specific work group. So we had conversations about that where it made sense why a specific work group was identified. And so now, then the next phase is, so does that mean we need to maybe clean up the language so in that policy so that it's more explicit why that group is separate? And then also could some of that lead to additional closed session discussions with the board regarding legal advice as we work through some of those policies?
My takeaway also is those, if the board would adopt the policy, so we have a policy committee, we would take some of these recommendations through the policy committee that'll be meeting in August. The board would choose to adopt ACJ. The board would know that the policy committee, any edit, any recommendation that would come to you, we would have those 3 questions that the committee would kick around before either an edit or the adoption of a whole new policy would come to you. Like right now, we talk about those things, but when something is codified in policy, that has to be guaranteed because a policy violation is a huge issue. So like my big takeaway in my conversations really with Dr. LaChance, because he was the most forward facing with Anya and Michelle, was really around the need to adopt policy ACJ, which then will codify those 3 questions for our policy committee. And then really the fact that at this point, we don't have any glaring policies that immediately scream disparate impact.
Correct.
That was also my takeaway.
The change, yes, I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, because then that would be board members, we need to act immediately on that policy because we have not only would we have a lawsuit waiting to happen, we have people being harmed by it. So it was reassuring for me to hear initially that there wasn't that big glaring issue because something is going on. Because when we look at the performance of students, it's not where it needs to be. And you know, it's about policy, it's about people, and it's about connection to the community. And so we're just trying to work our way through all of it.
For example, a subtle, you know, recommendation or change to a policy. Policy could be, you know, in thinking about being inclusive, anywhere where it refers to him or her, his or her, replacing that with their. You know, some districts have taken that approach where it's inclusive of all people and all, you know, sexual orientations or gender preferred pronouns. And it's just a small sort of subtle change that has a big impact.
You know, and Anya, the part about that to me was that recommendation actually came up through our teacher negotiation process this year. So it didn't take a legal change, or it didn't take a lawsuit or some other
precedent to make it happen. It was RItenour teachers that were advocating for that change, working with administrators. So that was heartening to me.
Correct.
Other questions?
So if I'm understanding, the next steps is if there are specific policies, then that will be presented to the administrators, and then that will come back to the board for those suggestions and recommendations to those particular policies.
We also have we have a policy committee that typically has their eyes on it and conversation before it reaches the board.
But with the ultimate goal to be able to adopt ACJ equity policy that will pull in the framework of those particular 3 questions, which I know we as a board have been trying to actively do that work from the Ferguson Commission, as well as thinking about our policies exacerbating, perpetuating, mitigating, or eliminating disparities. Is that?
So policy ACJ was at the top of the list for me too. So I think it's codifying that and putting that into policy.
And I think that policy can be, there's kind of different versions. The districts that are looking at adopting it have very different versions. But I think that your equity statement is a really good starting place. So I think I would envision it incorporating a lot of that language from your equity statement and then adding in those accountability pieces with those questions and a commitment to reviewing, and we can even identify the specific data that would be reviewed as part of that.
Sounds good.
And I would agree that that's the rest of the recommendations that we would have are pretty minor.
Any other questions, board members?
Thank you. Appreciate all the help we can get.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are moving on to 3.02. Ms. Dina Hill, Interim Director of Child Nutrition, will present the 2021-2022 food bid recommendations.
You guys hear me okay? Of course, the RItenour vision is in partnership with parents, community. We'll develop leaders recognized for academic excellence and produce graduates who will become productive citizens and then lead a personal integrity and fulfillment. The mission is that we ensure learning occurs in a supportive environment that enables every student to think critically, solve problems, and develop the knowledge and skills necessary for our success in our diverse global society. The equity statement is that we will prioritize our interactions with every parent, student, and guest and colleague. Okay, so when we do the bids, of course, we do it on dry foods, frozen foods, fresh produce, milk, juice, bread, and pizza. The vendor list this year was the Cole Wholesale, US Foods, Jackson Produce, Prairie Farms, Beanboat Bakeries, but they didn't bid. Alpha Baking, Sun Farm, Pizza Hut, Domino's, and Old Time Produce, and Picaro Produce. The process that we do, we just decide on every bid that we do. We do our specifications for all of our bread, milk, produce, dry foods, fresh foods, and stuff like that. And then we do the estimates, the usage based on our projected usage. And then we select the delivery days and times, and then I send it out electronically. This year we did 211 dry foods and then 213 frozen foods. That didn't include milk, bread, and fresh produce. We awarded by the bottom line. Cole Wholesale for dry and frozen was at $1,293,974. And then US Foods, they were at $59,405. We also do produce the same way by the bottom line. So you see we have Vaccaro, Jackson, Cole, Sun Farm, and Old Time Produce. Milk and juice, the bread selection, or milk and juice selection was through Prairie Farms, Vaccaro, and Cole Wholesale. The bread was through Alpha Baking, Jackson Produce, and Cole, and it's always the bottom line. Pizza this year, Pizza Hut and Domino's, and Pizza Hut was a little cheaper too. So the bid recommendations that I'd like to do would be Cole and US Foods for dry and frozen, Vaccaro Produce for fresh produce, Prairie Farms for milk and juice, and then Alpha Baking for bread, and then Pizza Hut for our special pizza days. And then the total is $1,871,136. There's the bid comparison. I gave it to you like last week too, but I wanted you to be able to see the differences between the 3 years. Any questions on the bid recommendations?
I don't have any. I'm happy to make a motion to accept the bid recommendation. We need to call all of them out.
No, we just need to do the total bid.
Okay, for a total of $1,871,136 for fiscal year, for school year 2021-22.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any additional questions or comments? Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lonis?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Del Greco?
Yes.
And I vote yes. I'm waiting for Dr. Alvin Wilson.
I am also here also to do the meal price recommendation.
Dina, hold on. We're waiting for one last vote.
My money says she votes yes.
Just that. She's a yes.
Stacy votes yes. And so that closes the motion. Everything's approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will move on to 3.03, our meal price and CEP SSO recommendation.
So I analyzed, we already did the RItenour vision and mission, so I'll just get to the point. I analyzed the current meal cost and the current meal price. We also I did a comparison as well for the community CEP and the SSO, just so you can see it last week, but the meal cost and meal price is what I'm looking for. The breakfast, the total meal cost for breakfast is $2, and then the lunch is $3.45, and that includes labor, food, and general supplies as well. So that's the raw food cost. And what they pay currently now is $2 for breakfast and $3.50 for lunch. And so I am recommending that we can get a meal increase for adult breakfast from $2 to $2.35, and then for adults at lunch for $3.50 to $3.75.
It was mentioned last week during the work session about quantities. Is that going to be increased or standardized for the adults?
The portion size?
Yes.
Yes. It's going to be increased. It's just a little bit more, but yeah, it'll be increased. It'll be a little larger meal serving than the students would get.
So this increase is only for adults?
Only for adults.
And so Ms. Hill, we're running still with the seamless summer option, and that does not require a board vote to continue with that.
No.
Any other questions?
I move that we approve cost of an adult breakfast totaling $2.35 and the cost of an adult lunch totaling $3.75 as recommended to this board this time.
Second. It's been moved first and second. Any additional questions or comments? I will call for the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lomas?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Belgreco?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And Dr. Alvin Wilson?
She's a yes.
Dr. Alvin Wilson votes yes. So it's been approved. We have food and we have an increase in meal costs for our adults.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dina.
Thank you, Dan.
Okay. Moving on to 3.04. We are going to be conducting our 2021-2022 fiscal year budget year hearing. And I'd like to turn it over to Dwight.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm happy to present the proposed budget to the board. And again, we cannot meet our vision or our mission without adequate resources. And the equity statement for the business office and finances that we will allocate resources according to student need instead of just allocating them equally. So the budget document that you have has 4 sections. This is in compliance with the Meritorious Budget Award Program that is conducted by the Association of School Business Officials. So you can see the 4 sections and what they contain. The introductory section is made to stand on its own if somebody just wanted to read the executive summary. So when we look at state aid for next year, little higher weighted ADA projected simply because of our expanded summer school. It's not due to our attendance this year, which we struggled with, as well as enrollment was down, mainly because of kindergarten. So you can see that on the whole, about $351,000 more in state aid is what I'm projecting for next year than what we're getting this year. Tax revenue, these are based on the preliminary assessed values that we got from the county assessor as of April. And we have not received any since then. We will receive some preliminary ones as of July 1st, and then the final ones as of in September, when the board votes to approve the tax rates. So we expect some more current year taxes, generally because residential went up almost 14%, again, preliminarily. Commercial went down, and we don't get updated numbers on personal property yet. Prior year taxes, they've been running good last few years, above average, but again, we try to budget conservatively, so I'm bringing that down to where we normally budget. And merchants and manufacturers surtax, at the time I did this, I expected 1.5 million. We got in actually more than 1.6 million. In fact, I told the board at the work session that I would update you. So we got our payment last Friday, as I expected. And so these 3 categories, we actually received $42,000 more for the year than what we had budgeted. So that's pretty close, about as close as I've seen it in a while. So everything looks good this year, and hopefully these will be conservative and will receive more next year.
So that was 42 was for this year?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the summary of the operating funds. Again, that's general, teachers, and capital projects fund. Does not include the bond issue fund or the debt service fund. So you can see proposing operating surplus of almost 786,000. These numbers are all rounded in millions. Revenues and expenditures both going up, mainly due to federal coronavirus relief funds, specifically ESSER 2, and have about $2.8 million in the budget on that. And then some offsetting expenditures that we would need to incur, but mostly it's just the additions, the personnel additions that I'll talk about in a minute.
Dwight,
Yes.
the budget operating surplus, that's for the next fiscal year, right?
Yes, for the
Starting
proposed.
July 1st.
Starting July 1st, yes. July 1st, 21 through June 30th, 22.
Okay, so we've included everything in the budget and we still have a surplus. So are we not looking at any other positions, personnel, or anything to support our kids and teachers with that? Is that just?
Yeah, so the next slide is the personnel increases. We're looking at adding, I believe, 25 positions to the district payroll this coming year. Mr. Lindhorst mentioned ESSER 2. There's also the American Recovery Act that's out there known as ESSER 3. And so we're going to be working this summer to get broad-based community input around what the plan to expend ESSER 3 would look like, which could include additional positions above and beyond the 25 that are in the budget now.
Okay, looking at that could be several positions right there.
One of the challenges that we're experiencing right now, Dr. LaChance, is keeping a running total with the number of open vacancies, and that number is at 10 at current.
We're currently, after tonight, will be at 8.
So we're working to fill the positions that we have. There is a shortage in the labor pool to some extent. So we want to make sure that when we put positions out there that we're able to fill them with high quality candidates. And yeah, that's our next step.
Excuse me for a second. That includes 3, it's not include 3 district positions, so it's really 11.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I have a question, Dwight.
Yes.
Everything looks like it's increasing when you look at the 21, 22, but then at the bottom, it's a decrease.
Yeah, so again, the ending fund balance, we for the percentage, we look at a percent of the expenditures. So since expenditures are going up, since your denominator is going up, even though the ending fund balance is going up, the expenditures are going up 2.5 million, and the ending fund balance is only going up 800,000. So that's why the percentage of expenditures would decrease.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So as we were going through, as I said, we're looking at adding all of these positions. 8 new elementary teachers, 8 new sections, 6 elementary reading specialists. That will be 1 for each elementary school, mainly to work with kindergarten and first grade students. Adding 3 elementary counselors, which will result in each elementary having 2 counselors now, instead of next year, instead of having 1.5 now. 4 EL teachers across the district. 1 additional elementary social worker, which will result in now 2 for the 6 elementary schools. And 1, along with 1 bilingual social emotional support specialist for the district. Adding a middle school counselor and a math teacher at each middle school. And a high school math teacher and a high school counselor. The director of secondary education, as the board's approved. And then this year we did add 7 evening custodians, replacing contracted employees, and we still have 2 more positions to fill. And at the work session, I said we didn't cut anything, but going through it, I did realize that we did reduce the 10 part-time custodians that we had working on as the COVID-19 disinfecting team. We actually only hired 2 of them out of the 10 that we budgeted, and both of those are now evening custodians for us. So nobody was laid off that came in on a temporary basis. We've retained those 2. And enrollment projections, as you can see, next year projecting that we go back up very, very near the 1920 numbers. Again, this year, our enrollment dropped mainly because of kindergarten. And then out in the future, pretty stable enrollment. And I can answer any questions you might have. So it's called a cohort survival method. So you look at the history of how many first graders became second graders became third graders, and so on. And you get a historical average, which doesn't mean it's scientific, but it's the best method that I found that most districts use. And so then you say, okay, well, 98% of second graders become third graders every year. So I'm going to take our current second graders and project 98% of those will be in third grade next year, and so forth. And you just do that at every school, because every school has its own cohort survival percentages. And then it all comes together at the end.
My only concern is with all the construction and rehabbing of the houses around here, it's my own observation of new families moving in. Are we prepared if we have a bigger enrollment than what we project?
Well, so we always budget, we always have contingency amounts in the budget for a couple different things. One, for those teachers that over the summer may increase from the bachelor's to a master's step or further. And also if we find that we have more kids than we projected, we have contingency money in there to add those also. But those, we could also use ESSER 2 money to add because that is specifically to reduce class sizes, and that would obviously come into a play if we have higher enrollment. But we also look at between schools. One school may have a higher third grade than another, and sometimes we'll move staff from one building to another. So those are all the kind of possibilities that can happen.
What is that percentage of contingency?
I'm sorry?
What's the percentage of contingency, like 5%, 10%?
No, it's not that much. It's 275,000, which would cover about 2 or 3 positions. But again, right now the ESSER 2 money is, we have a lot of that. And so we would have no problem adding as many staff as we would need. The problem we would have actually would be space. So.
Board members, that's the conversation I look forward to having with you heading into next year, is taking a look at the boundaries in the district and engaging the community in a conversation around boundaries around schools. There is a disparity right now. The elementaries on the north end of the district, the enrollments are much higher at Kratz as well as at Marvin, and enrollments much lower at Booter as well as Iceland.
Any other questions? Since we've heard the summary for our budget hearing, I'd like to open the floor now for comments. Comments are limited to 3 minutes for the budget hearing.
What'd you say?
She said, Rob, Mr. Eaton, you have anything to say?
What, Rob, you got to say something?
Hearing no comments, this concludes the public hearing regarding the 2021-2022 fiscal year budget is now closed. We will move on to 3.05, budget approval. Mr. Lindhorst?
Yes, so I would recommend that the board approve the budget as presented.
I'm sorry to interrupt. The board is aware that as we did the extract of the document into the new system, can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges with the file upload, just so the board is aware of that?
Yeah, so the biggest problem with the budget as it's presented is it brings out in different places, 3 or 4 previous years, 3 years of actual current year budget and the next year budget, and as well as forecast in 3 years. But it's really the past ones that caused problem, because we had to bring data out of the old software and out of the new software and put them into a document. And so that was the main reason for the delay this year. So I apologize for not getting the budget document to the board sooner. As well as we have a bond issue now, a bond issue fund, which we need to implement that into the budget too. So a couple of those 2 reasons basically is why it took a little longer to create the document this year.
Thank you.
So I'd like to motion that we approve the 2021-2022 proposed budget as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none.
You know, in the past, and I'm really glad we kind of do this anymore, the bond would give us a projection outward over the next dozen years about how long our savings would go. And, you know, we can't tell what's going to happen in 30 days, no less than 3 years. But looking at our surplus, you would say, you know, we're going to be down to like $3 or $4 million by 2014, 15, somewhere in there. And I looked at our budget surplus, and it's just, you just sit here and say, man, I'm glad we're not doing those projections, and I'm glad we're where we are. Knowing that we fulfilled all the requests that our administration has, the superintendent wants to plan out, and still have a bit of a surplus that we can squirrel away into our savings for a rainy day is good to know. I mean, it makes you feel at ease with our budget, because now we don't have a riddle room. We got some elbow room in there to move around and take care of, and focusing on all these teachers to get everything. That's great. I don't think that in the history of the school district we have hired that many, added that many positions to the budget, just because, you know, we have the room and the ability to do so for these kids. And I think that can make one heck of an impact.
I appreciate the comment, Dr. Thomas. And as I shared on Tuesday night, board members, you know, many believe that this past year is the most difficult year that we're going to experience in education. I believe the challenges that we're going to face this next year, supporting the social emotional health of students, as well as the academic challenges that we know that some students are going to bring to us, are going to make for a very challenging year. So thank you. Pending your approval, we believe that we're going to have a lot of the resources and assets to meet those challenges that come with students this next year, and support not only support their academic growth, but also their wellness.
Just a question, how many counselors and social workers will the high school have this next year?
Ms. Hahn, number of counselors and social workers at RItenour High School this next year?
7 counselors, 1 full-time social worker, and it's the roles that we have with outside agencies as well as our schools too.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have the motion and second. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Lomas?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Belgorko?
Sure.
I vote yes, and Dr. Alvin Wilson voted yes as well.
Thank you.
So the budget is approved.
This is an awesome document.
Thank you.
Great
Mr.
budget.
Thank you. We will move on to 3.06, end of the year budget amendments, and that is also you.
Yes, so this is a annual item that the board approves just gives me as the treasurer the ability to make amendments to the budget regarding transfers from the general fund to the teachers and capital projects fund to make sure they stay at a zero balance, as well as other adjustments to make sure that we're in line with state compliance and generally accepted accounting principles. I can't increase the overall budget, but it's just changing it between line items. So I would ask that the board approve this item.
Madam President, I move that we authorize the Chief Financial Officer, its treasurer, with the approval from the superintendent, to make transfers and amendments as needed to comply with all applicable regulations, statutes, and generally accepted accounting principles as recommended.
Second. Motion and a second. Additional questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll do roll call. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Garden?
Yes.
Mrs. Del Greco?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Stacy's a yes.
And Dr. Alvin Wilson votes yes as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilmore. We'll move on to 3.07. Director of Operations, Mr. Smith, will present a construction proposal for summer construction projects.
Good evening. Of course, well-maintained facilities help achieve the district's mission and vision. And our facilities should provide the best physical environment for learning to occur, and all district schools should provide consistent and equitable environments. I'll talk to you about the addition of an all-gender restroom. Of course, many people have specific needs when it comes to restrooming. It's also important that everyone has a safe restroom space to use. Privacy is obviously important. In an all-gender restroom, it would be important that privacy is a priority, and also supervision would be a priority. In order to update a restroom and to be an all-gender restroom, we would need to include privacy partitions, a new tile floor. That would include removing and replacing the existing fixtures, adjusting the ceiling, improving lighting, other finishes. And then when we sent this out for RFP, we had alternates. One alternate was to paint the glazed tile wall. Another alternate was to completely retile the wall. We did get pricing back. Calicac provided the low base bid of $43,151. They also provided the low alternate number one bid for the epoxy wall paint. And that was $2,326. Calicac came very highly recommended by the Kirkwood School District. Matter of fact, the person that was spoken to there said they did cartwheels anytime that Calicac came up on their board reports. And therefore, I am recommending that the board approve the base bid of $43,151 and the alternate bid number one for $2,326 by Calicac for a total of $45,477 for construction of an all-gender restroom here at RItenour High School.
Mike, I'm painting the tile walls. I had a recent experience on renovating the kitchen and bathroom, and I had a company come in that says we replaced, your tub and tile and things, and they used an epoxy type paint. Is this similar to that?
Yes. Yeah, it will be an epoxy paint. It takes a special paint to adhere to those glazed tiles, because you put a regular type paint and it will just scrape right off.
Yeah,
So,
they made the tiles look like brand new, and even the glazing, they took care of the glaze, the mortar between it and everything, and it looked like a brand new wall.
yeah.
And if this is gonna be the same, it would be great, and that's a really good price for that too, because that stuff by the gallon is a couple $100 a gallon.
Correct.
You want a motion for this one first?
Yes, we're going to take them one now and then one after my next presentation.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve the base bid of $43,151 and alternate bid number 1 for $2,326 by Calipac for the total of $45,477 for construction of an all-gender restroom at RItenour High School as presented.
Second.
Second. Any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lomas?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Belbreco? Yes. I vote yes. And Dr. Alvin Wilson votes yes as well. Motion approved.
Next, just an update on concrete repair. Concrete repair is needed at several schools throughout the district. Safety concerns that is a concern, obviously, and then also to prevent further damage, we do have repairs that need to be made. An RFP was advertised, but we only had one contractor bid on that project. In order to ensure competitive pricing, we did not accept the bid. We need more bids than just one. And that contractor was RItenour. One of the projects that was on that RFP was an alternate here at RItenour High School to repair, patch, seal the walls of the ADA ramp leading down to Moore Field. This would also include painting the steel rails and grouting those rail pockets. What happens is water builds up in those pockets, causes the rails to rust, and then that expanding and contracting causes the concrete to break. We felt that this is a priority repair that needs to be made. RItenour submitted a bid of $25,000 for those repairs, which is a good price for the amount of repairs that need to be made in that area. We're confident that that price is reasonable. Therefore, I'm recommending that the board approve the alternate bid number 3 submitted by RItenour for repairs to the ADA ramp here at RItenour High School for $25,000.
Where does this company hail from?
They are here in St. Louis.
They're a local company?
They're local.
Are they, I've never heard of these guys. Are they?
Yeah, they have, they've done quite a bit of work around sidewalk improvements, Northwoods, Fenton, Graveway Road. They've done work for Rockwood, Sunset Hills, University City walkway improvements. They've done work for MoDOT as well.
What kind of recommendation did they have?
We were not able to contact any of them. We just know that they've done work for those areas.
I move that we approve the alternate bid number 3 submitted by RItenour for repairs to the ADA ramp at Lincoln High School for a cost of $25,000.
Is there a second? Thank you. Any additional questions or comments?
I'd like to ask a question. Can I ask why you say that?
I will tell you that when their name is brought up in our office, we will run. We will not work with them. Bad pay, bad workmanship.
Say that again?
When that company name is brought up in our office, we will run. It's bad pay, bad workmanship.
Are they feel confident in the work that they've done at the other places?
Pardon me?
Do we feel confident in the work that they've done for these other places?
Like I said, we weren't able to contact anybody about the references.
But we have nobody else.
So this was the one bidder.
Yeah.
And we just, the architect also felt this was a high value repair. And so at a relatively small project with high value, that was the reason that Mr. Smith and Dwight and I considered we're bringing this back to you tonight.
Did the architect say anything about them?
No.
There's one run nuts, industrial.
Do we have to put anything down before they do the work?
What's that percentage or make a payment before the work is done?
I'm not aware. Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Smith?
No.
I'm not aware.
Do we have to put a percentage down to start the work?
No, we have a season contract generally, we do not, especially on this small job.
It wouldn't be until it's, we generally wouldn't do that until it was completed on a small project.
Correct.
Larger projects, then you would put something down at the beginning. A small project, not until it was over, in most cases.
Is that on Knox Avenue and is 63139? Is that this?
That's Hampton,
That's
South
it?
City.
All the reviews on here are okay.
We've had a motion and a second, so
I hate having someone sit here and tell me the exact opposite. You know?
I'm sorry to hear you, Dr. Thomas.
I was saying, we got a gentleman here that has given us, like, it's like eyewitness testimony about the quality of the company. And it's really a hesitation, it's not even a leap of faith, it's a leap of, oh my gosh, should we actually do this? It's like, you know, we have a credible man telling us, we run when we hear their name. So I said, we need to have every safeguard in place, so if they don't do the work correctly, that they don't get paid. We don't say, well, you know, we're gonna pay them, it wasn't that big a job, because, you know, it's wire to wire or something. So unless it spells it out all correctly, and if we can hold their feet to the fire, we're not paying them, the quality is not there. Maybe we need to look at other places.
I think that we've all learned in the past that even when we have hired a company that we thought was reputable and it didn't work out, we took action and wound up okay at the end. And I think you all have done your studying and your, we're not the experts on concrete. And if you all have done your bid and you feel comfortable with this, doesn't work out, we have processes in place.
Yeah,
Because we wait any longer, we're not going to get it done.
and so the priority of this, so this is an access ramp, which is absolutely critical. And, to Mr. Eaton's feedback too, the fact that, the reason we didn't recommend the whole bid package was because of that one bidder. This is a relatively small project, and, Mr. Smith and Mr. Lindhorst will make sure that they would hold this contractor accountable. And, if we have a bad experience on a $25,000 project, we would ensure that they don't get another dime for the district, which potentially could be hundreds of thousands of dollars when we talk about our Prop S projects. There's going to be significant concrete work likely that's going to be coming. And the moment we see their name, they wouldn't get another dime. So this could be a bit of a trial run.
I agree with that.
Not that I don't believe you, Rob.
Oh, yeah.
So
It's great right now.
we have a motion on the floor, so I will call for a vote. Dr. Thomas?
I'm gonna go with a guarded yes.
Okay. Mrs. Lomas?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Belberko?
Yes.
I vote yes, and Dr. Alvin Wilson votes yes. And she says she agrees with you, Ruth. If they work out, it's a small job. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. All right, we are moving on to 3.08, social and emotional learning. Ms. Hahn will come and present.
So while he pulls that up, I will tell you when I'm going to talk about social emotional learning, this is not what we would want to do in a classroom, is have people sit for an extended period of time without taking a brain break or stretching a little bit. So, feel free to move just a little bit. As he pulls this up as well, I would hope that if you have time to review the safe and drug-free report. Am I losing everybody? All right. This is so riveting that everybody's losing. Okay, all right.
We're still listening.
Okay. So the safe and drug-free report, which is item 4.06 tonight, goes hand in hand with some of this overview. It's about a 40-page report, and I use this report like we use the instructional effectiveness report for academics. It will highlight in there anything that has to do with social emotional learning, as well as our outside agency work or work with our SROs, any type of calls that we have made. So I really encourage you to look at that, because that does guide a lot of the work that we do throughout the year. Obviously, our vision, mission, and equity statement all relate to how do we support our students, and a big part of that is the social needs of our students. So what I want to do with this presentation, and I will, it's a very brief one because I could go on and on and on, because this is such a big part of what we do in our school district, is just to show you where we are right now with a recharge of social emotional learning. Also talk a little bit about the fact that I would expect the board to hold my department and me accountable for the social emotional needs, and with the resources that you are putting in for next school year, I feel like we'll have the right team on board to move forward. So hopefully we'll have the data next year to show that it has made a difference. As Dr. Kilbride said, we know that this year was challenging, but next year it's going to need to be all hands on deck to support our students. So we are really holding everyone accountable for the social emotional supports. That includes our nurses, our administrators, people who we would normally consider part of the social emotional team, our school psychologists, social workers, counselors, but everyone needs to take a role in making sure our students and staff are healthy. So one of the things we did this past year is we asked the committee that was really working on the social emotional recharge, what is a quality or skill that you would want all of our students to possess by the time they graduate from high school? And I can tell you, if you think about that, most people didn't say, I want them to be proficient in algebra or, be a chemist. It really had to do with being a good person, showing empathy, showing respect. So we looked at those questions as we started looking at the plan we have for social emotional development. And what do our adults and students need? What professional learning do we need in the area of social emotional learning? And you can see in red, the area that we have not really put a lot of focus on yet, nor have we done in the past, is really partnering with the community. So that partnership is huge. That parent piece, the caregiver piece is huge to help us reach our goals. So that is going to be a big part of the upcoming school year. What do we do to include our community and parents? So some of the themes that came out with not only the committee, we did surveys of many of the adults in the district. These were some of the themes that came out with what we would want our students to have and be able to do when they leave. And one area that we probably would not have seen 10 years ago is that area about understanding how their emotions and brain work together. So a lot of that is new to our staff over the years when we've been talking about trauma and doing some of the trauma work. And we feel that this is one of the key areas for our students, is to really understand their body and how they can help with the brain and the functioning. We also looked at what do we need to thrive both socially and emotionally in RItenour, not only students, but adults as well. So if you look at all of those pieces, you know, really what it comes down to are many of the things that we have been doing, but we really need to get fine-tuned and really hone in on making sure that all staff, all students and families feel respected, valued, and welcomed in our school district. We also know that we need to be consistent. If I have a student in Booter and they are going over to Weiland and transfer over, we need to make sure we're carrying over all of these same themes and treating all of our students with the same dignity and respect. So based on that, we came up with, using our equity statement, looking at a lot of these themes, a statement of what we want social and emotional learning to be for our students in RItenour. And we want our students to be leaders, lifelong learners, and change makers. We also know that we want them to be able to persevere, advocate, and address personal and societal inequities. It's a pretty big statement, and it's probably, I don't think anybody would disagree that that is not a good mission and vision for our students with social emotional learning. So this is a piece that we pulled together as well. We oftentimes in the school district will have different areas that we put our focus on. We could say, oh, we're really working on trauma-informed practices this year. Oh, we're looking now at restorative practices. What we need people to see is that these are all pieces of the puzzle. If we want to have student wellness, we need all of these things together. You can't just focus on one piece. They all have to be there. So we want to get away from just saying, oh, we're really only working on trauma, or we're really only working on equity. You have to have all of these things for our students to be and staff to be well. So I want to get the school and our district to really start talking about student and staff wellness and how do all of those pieces play a role in that student and staff wellness. So Dr. Kilbride passed out to you what are those learning standards that we would want in the RItenour School District. So there's CASEL is the group that puts out a lot of the standards with those 5 key areas: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. So what we did is we looked through all of those, looked at what we felt were the values, and came up with the RItenour priority standards for social emotional learning. So this is the guiding piece that we will focus on when we come up with curricular activities, lessons, learning. How does that relate to our students? And the hope is by the time they graduate, they would possess all of competence in all of those social and emotional areas. Additionally, we looked at what professional learning would help each group interacting with our students. So we have a learning plan, and this is not a learning plan year 1 that you're expected to master all of these areas. But what do we feel are key pieces that we would want staff to master in order to be competent in these areas? So we have a professional SEL learning plan, as well as looking at how do we make sure our substitutes are equipped to also come into a classroom and make sure our students are getting what they need and deserve. each part of the training, we broke it down and we looked at what is that? If we're going to do Trauma 101, which is just the basic overview, how do we make that consistent across the district? So we have people who are trained with Alive and Well to give the training on trauma. So they've done the Train the Trainer series. And we also have in there, what books would we want people to look at? What movies would relate to trauma-informed learning? So we don't have people just, calling in, a friend to come in and talk about what they think trauma is and how that relates to our students. So we have for every area of professional learning, a learning plan that goes with it. This can be changed, it can be modified over the years, but this is really a 3 to 4 year plan that we want to look at every year and see what we need to change or add to. So our plan, our immediate steps to take, working this summer on a developmental framework and curriculum. So looking at all those standards, what does it look like from pre-K all the way through grade 12 for a student to be socially aware? How does that look in middle, high school? And that should be ready hopefully by the fall. We want to make sure that we have a plan for caregiver engagement and learning opportunities next school year. How do we incorporate the cultural competencies into the SEL work so it doesn't look like that's a separate thing? It all has to go hand in hand. And how do we make sure that our buildings are embedding SEL actions and goals in their CSIP? One of the big areas that we're going to do in the fall as well is look at how do we revise our handbook to really hone in on some of those restorative practices, look at what we're doing for discipline, and are we seeing a change in the number of out-of-school suspensions, office referrals based on the work that we're doing. So obviously, we want our students to have all of these pieces. And we have the tools to do it. But as I always say to administrators and counselors, you can put a poster on a wall. You can do something and say, oh, we're really working on being, equitable, being trauma informed. But if you're not really doing it, it's not going to make a difference. I was listening this morning when I was on my run to the John Mayer song. It's kind of old too, waiting on the world to change. We don't have time to wait for the world to change. We have to start really moving now. And I feel recharged. I hope that with the new team members, they get a lot of rest this summer and they come back recharged because we have our work cut out for us. So again, I would encourage you to really look at that safe and drug-free report. It's long, but it does have some good information in there. And like I said, next year, we would hope to see that data change and go down. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
You just said thank you.
I just want to thank her for all of her work.
Lisa, did you have a question?
I did. I would ditto that what Brad said about just this work and then outlining it strategically for our staff as well as including substitutes and our support staff in this work for the social emotional plan. One of the questions I had was surrounding competency. So I know that we're going to give them this training, but what does that look like for us to know, like, oh, they got it? Is that just day-to-day practice? Is that in our data, or are there actual like artifacts that we would be capturing from that particular professional development?
So with the professional development, that's a great question because, it's not like you give somebody a test. It's really what does it look like in the classroom or in the cafeteria, wherever we are. We are coming up with also the non-negotiables that we have for our building administrators. Those are being updated, and a lot of that is on there to really look at, are we seeing that across the board? And there are some data pieces that go with it. I don't have an easy answer for that, Lisa, but except to say that it's really easy to go in a classroom or go into a cafeteria setting to see, is this really taking place? Is the language we're using positive? Are all staff members being treated with respect? Are we treating all students with respect? You can see that just through a walkthrough. What do our walls say about what we really see as important? Is it student-centered? I think some of the cultural audits and pieces that we do will answer some of that for us. And the cultural competency work with staff members will be another piece that will play into this.
I don't have a question, but I would like to share a little story, a positive about being on the board so long and going through all your documents. We are really making a lot of progress. I ran across a letter I received early on from a parent who was upset because when she read her son's homework, it was asking, how do they feel? How do you feel about this statement? What's it make you think of? And she refused to let that happen, that who are we to ask her child how they feel? And, that just sounds almost funny now because that's a big part of what we do, because our kids need to have that. We need to listen to them. That's how we're going to help them.
Right.
And so I just wanted to share that story because it shows that we're headed in the right direction.
We are heading in the right direction. We have a lot of work to do.
Yes.
But I will say that until the day I retire, we have a lot of work to do until we see, fantastic results across the board. We have people like you that, need us to really support you on a regular basis. And if we're not doing that, we need students to feel comfortable saying, this is not working for us.
Ms. Hahn, can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned a revision of the student handbook. Can you talk about what would the student's role be in that?
Students' role is going to be huge. Students will play a big part in that. And I want to look at students not only at RItenour High School, also in alternative ed, because those are the students where a lot of them, the system has not worked for them. So what can we do differently? What do we need to support you? To look at each one of our areas and, get away from some of that, oh, this is a 10-day suspension and a hearing based on this. What are those factors that play into that?
Ms. Hahn, I'll say that I'm really excited to see all this work and everything, because I think it's such a huge part in how we develop our children and how they go out into the world. The one question I have for you, I was looking on your slide that has the Trauma 101, and you've got certified staff, OBs, bus, and so on and so forth. Is there any room for the Board of Education?
You bet. Yeah. So I just want to say thank you to the board. Again, I mean, I know Dwight jokes a lot about how I'm always pushing for more people. It's not just more people, it's making sure we have the right people. Mental health is going to be a big issue that we need to address next year. And there is a likelihood I will come back and say, well, we probably need a few more people just for therapy or something additional. But, I just, with what we know, what I see, what comes across the, we have several students on the run right now. We have to be available and we have to have the right people supporting our kids. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Moving on to 3.09, Dr. LaChance will come and present personnel recommendations.
Board members, I'm presenting personnel items 1 through 24. I'm open to any questions you may have and ultimately asking for your approval.
I have a question about number 21. The position.
So needed a position to support the work of virtual instruction. As our virtual instruction needs have declined compared to this current year and not needing a full-time position to address those needs, just identified a lead teacher to support the
Did we
needs.
have that last year?
We last year had a position as a full-time instructional coach to address the need. And so this time, this would be considered an extra duty as the person also teaches in the program.
So this is just a extra duty co-curricular.
Yes.
Mike, number 2. Curiosity thing, is he following later?
Well, that information was not provided, interestingly. It was just stated that they were choosing not to continue.
I don't believe that person is, based on what I know at this point. But I think, Mike, if you want to share, the position was declined, is that correct?
Yes. Yes. So the position was declined late in the day last Thursday, and wasn't brought to my attention until after the meeting had occurred, and the board had approved. So the position was initially accepted, and then the person changed their mind late in the day. And by the time the email strand reached me, the board had already approved the position last week.
Move we approve positions 1 through 24 as presented for tonight.
Second. So we've got a motion and a second. Any additional questions or comments? All right, hearing none, we will call for the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lonis?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Del Greco?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Thank you.
We got one more, Dr. LaChance. Dr. Alder. Yes, sir.
Yes.
And that's a yes. So our personnel recommendations are approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a quick update on vacancies, we're still looking to hire 4 teachers, 1 EL teacher, 1 office professional, 1 social worker, 1 social emotional teacher's assistant, interventionist support, 2 custodians, and 1 maintenance staff member.
Does that include the new positions?
That does include the new positions.
Wow.
Yes. We've been very active in the last few months. We've approved 64 personnel, all told, with people leaving and joining. It's been an active 2 months.
Dr. LaChance, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. 3.10. Open the floor for board member comments.
I just say I'm looking forward to the start of the school year. I think there's a lot of things going on. It might be a rough year, but I don't know. I'm usually not one to look and say I'm really optimistic in all this, but boy, I tell you, it seems like we got a lot of people coming in and a lot of good things going on, and it might be a hard year, but I think it's going to be an awesome year at the same time. You know, it's bringing people back into our buildings, getting kids going again, teachers with kids. It's just going to be awesome. I look forward to seeing Black and Orange Day and the first day of school and every day after that.
I'd like to say for the record that I thought the graduation of the AEL went very well and very impressed with Karen. She's seems to be doing a great job. You can see the love that she has for her job shine through her students.
I agree with that.
One other thing is when we have the Black and Orange Day, we've got the color run coming at the same time, August 28th, correct? So just get that on your calendar and look for things coming your way.
Thank you, everyone. We will move on to our consent agenda items.
Before before we approve it, I had time this past week or so to read some of these plans, and I was really intrigued with the amount of detail in 4.01, which is the professional development plan. And it took a while last night to go through it and read it all and everything. I'd invite everyone, if you don't have time, if you do have time, to go through it and read it. It's really comprehensive and detailed. And I was really impressed with it, how it covers everything. I'd like to see if it's rolled out as it's laid out, it's going to be a really good plan for our administrators and teachers and faculty and everybody to advance themselves.
Thank you.
But with that, if everybody doesn't mind, I'd like to move that we approve consent agenda items 4.01 through 4.11 as presented this night.
Second. So we had a motion and a second. I did have one comment on that too, just with the PD. I did notice that there was some, when they, I think it was in the audit part, when we're looking at ineffective, the self-audit, the ineffective, and the minimal effective as far as professional development. So just thinking about taking a deeper dive as into why the self-audit people are rating it that way. And I'm assuming that's our staff that's giving that rating.
Yes.
So I'm hoping we're taking a deeper dive into the to find out more about the rationale of why they're ranking it ineffective or minimally effective.
So board members, that's a great question. And also there's a number of reasons why that's important. As a part of MSIP 6, which Dr. Green and I presented recently, a big part of it is going to be qualitative surveys where staff members are rating their level of agreement, rating their level of buy-in, rating their level of this and of that. And if we have staff members, well, first of all, quality, we have to improve quality. We have to understand root causes. But in the eyes of accreditation, if we have staff members that are ranking us low, that has the potential to impact our accreditation status. So the follow-up would be a series of focus groups, trying to get at the whys around specific schools. There are specific schools that you can see are extremely low versus other schools that are extremely high. So there's definitely some actionables in here that are going to cause us to ask some further questions about PD so that when we do get to that MSIP 6, we've got a lot of the issues ironed out so that we can get some higher scores.
So we have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lonis?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Del Greco?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And Dr. Alvin Wilson votes yes as well. Thank you, everyone. Consent agenda items are approved. So we will move on to section 5.01. Looking for, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would like the motion that we reconvene in closed session per state statute 610-021 for the purpose of the discussion of personnel agenda items.
Second. Thank you. Dr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mrs. Lonis?
Yes.
Mrs. DeGarden?
Yes.
Mrs. Del Greco?
Yes.
And I vote yes.
Yes.
Okay, and she voted yes, so we will now convene in closed session. We want to take a 5-minute